Hello everyone. I have had the idea for this video for a very long time, but I just never got around making it until I saw James Griffith's video. But his idea was a bit different. He talked about one album of each year of the 90s that he listened to at the time. But I can't do it that way because most of the times I don't associate these albums with the year when they were released because I was always very slow at buying albums when they were released. It's only been during recent years that I have been active buying albums when they were released. In fact, only one of these albums I bought during a year when they were released. So I made a couple of rules to this. One was that no archive releases, they had to be new releases at the time. Had to have known about these albums at the time, which didn't work out perfectly because one of these albums I had no idea, and had to have at least known about this artist, and preferably had to have some other albums by these bands at the time, which didn't work out at all because 6 out of 10 of these artists I didn't have at the time any other albums by them. I try not to mention the other candidates so that this doesn't go too much talking about how I fought between such and such album. When I started looking out these albums, there was one year that I knew pretty much that which album is going to win that year, although it didn't turn out quite that simple. And there was one year that I knew that there would be two albums that I would be really struggling to decide which album I would choose. So okay, let's get started. By the late 80s, my interest for the current music then was really fading because my interest was very much heading towards the older music. So yeah, I still followed sort of like from the sidelines what was happening during the then current music, but I had very little interest in what was happening at the time. Then came 1990, and that was my year out of music because I was in the army that year, so there was very little happening to me that year. I did see a few concerts and I did buy some records, but not many, until I just checked my notes and I noticed that during the last few days of the year I did make a large purchases for me at the time, because at the time I bought mostly I bought like 1 or 2 albums at the time, but then during those last few days I bought 10 albums on each of 2 occasions, and I had made one larger purchase earlier during the year when I bought 6 albums. But so yeah, for the year 1990 I had 8 different candidates. And there were a couple that I did really consider, but it wasn't difficult to choose this one, Kolmas nainen, hyvää ja kaunista. Like I said, I was in the army in 1990, and we had 2 cassettes there that we were able to listen to. One was by Depeche Mode. I believe it was Music for the Masses. It might have been Violator, but it's kind of hard to remember because the cassette didn't have sleeve. We only had the tape there. And I liked this, but it didn't make that much of an impression to me. Otherwise I would remember which one it was, and this one was the other one. And this is one of my all-time favorites, and I listened to this a lot, and then I saw them that summer, and you probably can't tell, but that's valehtelisin jos väittäisin. I remember when they were playing that song during a gig, and it was the moment when I became a fan. And this is one of my absolute favorite bands of all time in Finland. Okay, 1991 was the year when I when I was making this, that I was like, okay, I know which is going to win that one. I had 8 different candidates for 1991, and it was easy to choose Nirvana, Nevermind. I didn't buy this in 1991, I bought it in 1992. I did have one other candidate that I was seriously considering over this, which was Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, Skies Crying, until I remembered that that's actually an archive release. After that, this was a clear winner. Yeah, 1991, Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I don't remember if Come As You Are was also released in 1991, but those made a huge impact on me, as did this whole album the next year. Yeah, classic for a good reason. 1992, this was the year that I had most candidates. I had 12 different candidates, and I did go back and forth between a few of these, but again, it didn't take very long. It did take some debate between these albums, but I went with Faith No More, Angel Dust. I remember reading an interview with the guys a few years after the release of this, and they said that when they were making this album, some record company executive came to listen to what they had done, and he said to them that, hope you didn't buy houses, which all of them had done, meaning that he thought that this album was not commercial. To me, this doesn't have that much of a difference between to the Real Thing album. It's not that big of a difference to me. So in that sense, I see this one being just as commercial as the Real Thing. That is, if you consider the Real Thing being commercial. I don't know how much each of these albums sold, but yeah, I don't see these having like the world of difference. Difference from this one to the next album, King for a Day. I mean, that's a big difference in my opinion. But yeah, brilliant album. Very 90s in my opinion. For 1993, I had 7 candidates, and again, just like 1991, this one was very obvious choice for me. This is Crowded House, Together Alone. This is just absolutely melodic, wonderful album. I just love this one to bits, which is why I have this one on CD. I have the double CD box set, and I have vinyl. Yeah, I knew about Crowded House in 1993. I had heard several of their songs, but actually I don't think that I had heard any of the songs from this album at the time. But yeah, just absolutely brilliant album. 1994, I had only 5 candidates, but actually I had to really think about between 3 albums which one I was going to choose, but in the end I went with Tom Petty, Wildflowers. And this is the only album out of these 10 albums that I bought during a year it was released, so I bought this in 1994. Easily my favorite Tom Petty album, and I'm really happy that this is finally being reissued on vinyl at the end of next week actually. Yeah, usually when I'm like this excited about album, I think that each and every track is absolutely fantastic, but this one does include one song that I'm not really fussed about, Honeybee. Yeah, very average song. So in that sense I could say that Full Moon Fever, for example, would be better album, but even though I like every song on Full Moon Fever, the song quality overall on this one is much better than on Full Moon Fever, which I think is great album, don't get me wrong. But yeah, just brilliant album. 1995, I had 6 different candidates, but in the end it was clear that I would choose between 2 albums, and I really had to struggle between these 2. It was really difficult choice, but in the end I went with Chris Isaak, Forever Blue. The origins of this album was when Chris Isaak came back home from the tour to find his girlfriend had left him and emptied their apartment. So this is 13 songs about the breakup of a relationship, and when I heard that I was like, doesn't sound like a good idea to me, but it is. It's brilliant album, full of emotion, full of melodic songs, just great stories within these songs. Yeah, I'm really glad that I decided to give this one a chance. 1996, only 5 candidates. And again, there were a couple of albums that I did debate over, but didn't take too long for me to decide. Manic Street Preachers, Everything Must Go. I don't actually remember when was the first time that I heard about the Manics, but I do remember the release of their first album already. But yeah, although I did like several of their songs, but nothing really catch my imagination until this album. And yeah, it's absolutely full on great songs. Elvis Impersonator, Blackpool Pier, Design for Life, Kevin Carter, Enola Alone, Everything Must Go, Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky. Just absolutely brilliant album. My favorite Manic Street Preachers albums of all time. 1997. I have to say that I was even debating that I skipped this year because I came up with two albums that I chose for this one. So no, it was not difficult to choose which one I went for. Bob Dylan, Time Out of Mind. Really dark album, but yeah, just great album. Like Not Dark Yet, Cold Irons Bound, Make You Feel My Love, Till I Fell in Love with You. Yeah, brilliant album, but very dark album. Yeah, this one I bought much later. I did hear a few of the songs at the time when this was released, but yeah, I bought this several years later. 1998. Again, I had 6 different candidates, and yeah, I did go between 3 albums quite a bit, but I did end up going with Mavericks, Trampoline. Didn't know anything about this album at the time. I only heard about this album when I bought this album a few years later. I was on holiday with my brother in Sweden, and we were at the record store, and he brought this to me and said that, listen to this one, I think you're gonna like it. And I knew about the Mavericks. He had loaned me one of the earlier records. I don't know if it was the one previous to this one or even earlier, but I didn't like it. So I knew about the band, but yeah, didn't know anything about this. But looking at the sleeve, I thought that this looks kind of interesting. Looks to be more like more vivid than what the other album had been. So I decided to give a chance, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's full on like upbeat, even love songs and songs about loneliness and yearning. Brilliant album. Just yeah, really glad that I gave this one a chance. 1999, I had 5 candidates, and even though I did go debating between a couple of albums, it didn't take me long to decide on Counting Crows, This Desert Life. And this one was quite more somber affair than the previous album, Recovering the Satellites, so that's why I didn't actually like this album in the beginning. But it didn't take me long to start getting into it, and over the years I have listened to it more and more. Still, I think this is my second most listened to Counting Crows album, but yeah, great album, quite mellow, but just great album. Okay, that's it for this time. Thanks for watching. Hope you like this. Leave a comment. Bye.